Good morning. Happy Father's Day. I remember the first time I got the call from my dad. It was a great feeling it's almost an honor to be passed down the call of Happy Father's Day. So I remember that day like the back of my hand, and I'll remember every day since. And it's just a joyful day to have. We're living in a current society where I think they're starting to realize what impact the fathers actually have on the home. We're starting to see more of that in your divorce settlements where the kids are getting split up. The father's actually getting more time with the kids when it used to be hardly at all. And so I think people are starting to realize the impact that men actually have in the home. Most men are gone away from the home because they're working and providing. It's a pretty common home. And a lot of times the kids get to spend more time with their moms than they do their dads. And I wanted to present to you two things the scripture talks about that deals with father or fatherhood. And the Bible teaches strongly how to be a father and how not to be a father. And this applies to any age. It doesn't matter if you got great-grandchildren, you're still a father, you're a grandfather, or a great-grandfather. And so either way you look at this, you'll never stop being a dad, those who are dads. And if you are not a father, well, you probably are a father figure to someone in the world. So let's start in the book of Genesis chapter 1. Or Genesis, we'll get to the chapter in just a moment. Book of Genesis. We'll be in Genesis 13. Genesis chapter 13 is where we're going to start off this morning. Here's how I picture a spiritual father, and that's who I'm speaking for this morning. I cannot speak for a father who's not a Christian. If our morals are not the same, then what I say may not have much impact. Though I hope it has some. I'm really speaking to those who are doing their best to raise their kids up in the Lord. Now, here's the way I picture one of those fathers. You have your wife who is a mother, and she's going through her motherhood, and she is trying to raise her babies the best that she knows how. And then you have you, and you're going to raise kids a little differently. As long as everybody is on the same agreement that we're going to raise them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord, but parents do different styles of raising, completely different styles. You can just watch any couple. You'll see a dad will raise their kids like this, and a mom will raise their kids like this. But if they have the same goals, then it's definitely going to work out. So I look at a father as a spiritual giant in the family. I believe that the home should be focused on the head of the home, and the Bible teaches that is the man. And so he should be a giant. Everywhere in the home, he should be able to be asked for advice. He should be able to be looked up to. He should be a giant in the family. And it's an amazing feeling to know that your kids actually watch you and they pay attention to you. Jed, the other day, I told him to sit down in a seat. We're going to the store. And I said, sit down in your seat. He said, why? I said, because I told you to. I said, to me, that's a good enough reason, because that's what I was raised on. You do it because I asked you to. He says, well, Mommy tells me why I need to do something. I said, I'm not going to tell you that. So my kids listen, they're observing, and it's really it's a beauty is what it is to actually see that your kids are watching you, they're actually learning from you, and it's a reality check because it really makes you watch what you do. And so a father should be that one person that's looked up to the most because he does lead the home. It's just like, if we were living in a kingdom with a king, we would want to be able to respect our king or queen. And they're going to live to a high standard. And a father and a mother should do that. But in this case this morning, more so the father. So we're going to start out with it seems a little more negative. What a father should not be. And this really is a great lesson for everybody. Because this teaches not just about fathers, but it really teaches about all people. fathers, mothers, children, whoever you may be. All the lessons still apply. Genesis 13, let's start here in verse 10. This is about Lot and how he pitched his tent towards Sodom and what it meant to do that. Genesis chapter 13 and verse 10, it says, "And Lot lifted his eyes and saw all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere." This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. "Like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go towards Zoar." And it says, "Then Lot chose for himself all the plains of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated from each other. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the city of the plains, and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom." Now, this may not seem like a big deal. Okay, they got split up. Okay, they picked different lands, and this place was absolutely gorgeous. It was called the Fertile Crescent, and really the most beautiful place in the world. And it was even described as the Garden of the Lord, is how Lot described it. So Lot must have heard some stories about how the Garden of Eden looked to be able to make a comparison. He said, just like the gardens of Egypt, beautiful. And he's looking over this place and he says, okay, I'm going to go out towards Sodom. Now, I don't know if he really knew much about Sodom. Don't know for sure. I don't know if he had any warning. Hey, don't go over there. But that was his destination. Verse 13, "The men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord." Okay, you take a man that has a wife, that has children, and you're picking a place to live. Canaan was a land that would eventually be given to the Israelite people, be given to Joshua. I think Joshua was the one that finally got to lead them in. And Abraham was promised a lot of things, and Abraham lived there. I mean, Abraham dwelt in the land of Canaan. But we're focused on Lot. Lot decided to go to the land of Sodom. Now, turn to 2 Peter. 2 Peter has a little insight on this as well. 2 Peter chapter 2, 7 and 8. So if I have a family and let's say I have a job opportunity, and this job opportunity is going to put me in a place where my kids are going to be heavily affected, where we know that this particular town is not a great place to raise kids, but that's where my job is going to take me. Do I have a decision to make? Absolutely I do. I can look out for my job, which jobs right now are really easy to come by. I mean, you can just go out and get whatever job you want because nobody's working. So right now it'd be easy. If I didn't want to do that job for the sake of my kids, I can go find another one pretty quick. So I have to make a choice. Lot had to make a choice. So let's say he didn't know about Sodom. But word would soon come to him because he's traveling towards Sodom, and I'd say maybe some people are traveling from Sodom, and you would think that some words were being passed about how crazy this town and these cities are. They're wicked. They're known to be wicked. And look at 2 Peter. Look at the words here. 2 Peter chapter 2, and we'll start here in verse 7. It says, "And delivered righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the filthy conduct of the wicked." There is not a word in Scripture that actually gives any type of good judgment to Sodom and Gomorrah and the city of the plains. Nothing. The only time there was a comment that was made that was kind of good was Jesus was talking to, I think, the Pharisees and talking to the Sadducees, and he says that Sodom and Gomorrah is going to have an easier time on judgment than you guys. That's the only compliment they ever got. And so he's here. Lot should have moved years ago, but he was stuck. He chose to live in this position. Now, do I know exactly his motives behind it? No. But my strong opinion about this is that Lot should have been gone, because we know the cities of the plains. We know what their conduct was. And if you have children, would it not be wise to put them in the best position they can be in? Well, absolutely. But Lot stayed in this town, and it got so bad that we learn later, Genesis 19, that even some of his children did what? Stayed in the town. So they got caught up in the wickedness and the filthiness, and they said, I want to stay here instead of being delivered. So a father has to look out for where his children are being raised, what they're being raised by, what they're hearing, and a mother does that as well. Now, 1 Samuel chapter 2. 1 Samuel chapter 2. I know we live in a different time. I had the great privilege, and it is a great honor, a great privilege to help with VBS. I really enjoy it. And I always try to teach the teenagers. I love talking with teenagers because I like to know what they're going through now. Because it's hard, we can't really relate to it because we're not going through it. So I like to figure out areas that teenagers are struggling with. Why is it hard for them to teach the gospel at school? What are the reasons behind it? And every one of the kids opened up and said why it's hard to teach at school. And I've learned some valid reasons why it's tough for 16-year-olds to go to school and say, I'm a Christian, and here's why. So next time you see some teenagers that are Christians, give them great, great encouragement. So 1 Samuel chapter 2, we looked at some areas in their life that they're struggling with. And it's definitely, with teenagers, you can say, we live in almost like a different universe. The way they're being raised, what they're hearing in school, what their friends are like, what they do for fun. It's like, we didn't do none of those things. I wasn't raised like that. I've heard people say we are nothing alike. The only thing that we're alike in comparison is that we're human beings. Everything else is different. Everything in our lives are different. And so there is something that is really making a big change, and some people don't realize it's having a great impact on how people turn out. And look here at 1 Samuel chapter 2, 1 Samuel chapter 2, and let's look here at verse 12. Now the sons of Eli were corrupt. They did not know the Lord. Now, you may be wondering, well, why is this? How could Eli's sons not know the Lord? Eli is one who's raised on a pedestal in Scripture. Now the sons of Eli, read it again, were corrupt. They did not know the Lord. Look at verse 7. Therefore the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, for men abhorred the offering of the Lord. Now jump again to verse 24. Now, my sons, for it is not a good report that I hear. You make the Lord's people transgress. Now, are Eli's sons doing good or doing bad? I've boiled it down that it's only two choices you can make, a good choice and a bad choice. Even if you make a choice that you don't really know about, it's still going to have a good effect or a bad effect. So it's always important that when you're making choices, that we really evaluate what we're doing. Now, turn to chapter 3. This is a little bit about their sons, but now turn to chapter 3. Chapter 3 and verse 13. It says, For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knows, because his sons made themselves vile, and he did not do what? He didn't restrain them. So you got a kid, and this is definitely for not just fathers, for fathers, mothers, grandparents. You got a kid that's acting unruly. His kids were acting unruly. They were corrupt. They didn't know the Lord. They were causing the people to do things that were not good. And he did what? Nothing about it. That's what I've noticed a lot lately. I have noticed how kids rule the house. Literally rule the house. Because they can throw a fit, they can do this or do that, but they absolutely rule on what the choices will be. Now, I know you look at me like I'm a kid, most of you, and that's fine, but I wasn't raised like that. A lot of the kids I know weren't raised near that way. You did not run your house. It was clear who ran the house. My house, it was more my mom than my dad, but, she ruled her roost. It was her home. And so we weren't raised. I don't know very many kids that acted that way to their moms and dads unless they were just absolutely spoiled. But now I always pay attention to things and out in public. I'm always watching. I don't mean to ever eavesdrop, but how do you not when some conflict's going on? It's hard not to sit back and watch. Even my wife says, you're staring at these people. And I just like to observe how human beings are. And what I've noticed majority of the time is the kid is going to get his way. And that's going to lead to pretty sad life, because once he gets older, what's going to happen? Okay, he didn't get the job interview. He didn't get the job. What's going to happen to his emotions? Well, he's going to say that person's wrong. I get what I deserve. And now you got parents coming into the school because their kids got spanked, and now they're trying to get the principal fired. Used to it was what? You got spanked by your teacher, then the principal, and then you got spanked when you got home. That happened with me. I'm not that young. So now it's different. Oh, the teacher spanked you? Let's get him fired. Oh, the principal? Let's get him fired. Oh, the school board member? Let's get the school board member. It's just like, how can we defend our kid at whatever cost? Just so you know, kids can be wrong, even if they're your own kids. A lot of people don't realize this now. People my age raising their kids, it's wild. But I can't teach them because they don't come here. They don't go to church. It's hard for them to understand the reality of being a father or being a mother. So don't be like who? Don't be like Eli in this aspect. When your kids are acting that way, you need to have the discipline. And discipline is something in almost every aspect of life is kind of going out of the window. Sports, clubs at school, when you do something wrong, some teachers now just let them do it. And there's not much discipline behind it. And I'm not talking about any teachers specifically here because I didn't go to Bergman, so I don't know how you guys teach. Apparently pretty good. You've been teaching for quite some time. Proverbs chapter 29. Proverbs, the 29th chapter. I know already how I want to be this best friend, this to my boy, but I think a best friend definitely tries to help or try to correct or try to do anything. I think that's what a good friend does. A good friend is not someone who ignores wrongdoings. It's not a good friend. It's an unhealthy friend. A good friend is not someone who will make sure you're walking the straight line. If you have a friend that tries to make sure or everything you do, and if it's wrong and they're sitting there trying to justify it, that's not a good friend. What we call that now is called a toxic environment. Proverbs chapter 29, look at this about the fathers. Proverbs 29 and verse 15. This is something I know a lot of people know, a lot of people's read. The rod and rebuke give wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. Verse 17, correct your son and he will give you rest. Yes, he will give you delight to your soul. Eli did not do that with his boys. Now, lastly, on what a father should not do, let me get to my point here, is 1 Kings chapter 15. First Kings chapter 15. We'll start here in verse 25. 1 Kings 15, 25. It says, now Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, became king over Israel in the second year of Asa, king of Judah, his reign over Israel 2 years. He reigned over Israel 2 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and he walked in the way of his father, and in his sin by which he had made Israel sin. Now, we're not going to go into great detail about what happened with Nadab, with Jeroboam, but we see the example set. There was a great illustration about a man and his son. And when the father got home from work every day, he would put his lunchbox in the fridge. He would put his thermos up. He didn't talk to his family right when he got home. He went straight to the pub, because this was in Europe. Went to the pub, went to the bar every day after work, because that's what all his friends did. And they hung out for a couple hours, and they go home and be with their families. It was apparently a pretty good repetition. And the son finally got old enough that it was snowy outside, and he noticed that he heard some crunching in the snow as the father was walking towards the pub. And it was his son doing what? Jumping in his big footprints. We've all been there. Most fathers have been there watching their kids jump in theirs. Well, the father wasn't even paying attention to what was happening. And as the child got older and got older and got older, what do you think was happening? Every day he would go with his father because his son would come home from school, and both the father and son would go to the bar. And both of them were raging alcoholics, and both of them died young. So that's just a small story compared to many. What happened with Nadab? What happened with Jeroboam? Okay, Jeroboam was not a good king. He followed in the way of his father. And his sin, the father's sin, which he had made Israel sin. And he says, okay, instead of trying to fix the solution, I'm going to add to the problem. I'm going to be just like my dad. So if you're a dad that does not set good examples, realize that your kids watch you every single day. Even as grandparents, even as great-grandparents, whoever that may be. Your children will watch you all day, every day. I've watched my dad, and though I'm not his blood, there's areas where I act just like him. And it's not a trait. It's not something I inherited. It's something I've watched and put into my life. I'm not saying they're bad things, but there are areas where I'm like, well, that's exactly what my dad would do. And it's just from watching him over the years. So just like a kid, everyone that I've talked to call him a sponge. You know, it's like throwing them in the water and they just soak everything up. So it's crucial that the leader of the home is setting those proper and good examples. If you don't, they will watch you. And there is a chance that they'll watch you and say, I don't want to be nothing like you. But there is a chance they're going to watch you and say, well, I'm probably going to be just like them. So it's crucial that the giants, the spiritual giants of the home, are setting those proper examples. Now let's get to the positive. I like to look at the negative first and end on the positive. I had a teacher at school that was the opposite. He would always present the positive, and then I'd leave feeling sad. I didn't like to leave feeling sad. I like to leave uplifted. He always started with the positive, ended with the negative. Now, what do we need? We look around the world today, teachers looking into your students' homes, because obviously you know who has good homes and bad homes. It's pretty obvious. And you care for them. You know, I have a high respect for teachers. My dad was always telling me he was a special ed teacher, but he dealt with the juvenile special ed teachers, or the special ed students. So he dealt with students that had a very troubled home on top of being special needs. And he said there were some rough cases. And Dad, who had the shortest patience I ever met in my life. I mean, you couldn't even help him do anything. You didn't help with changing the oil. You didn't help with fixing or building anything, because the moment something was wrong, you had to go leave. It was his way or no way. And all of a sudden, I don't know what happened. So I'm raised with that is real impatient. I ain't trying to talk bad or be mean. I'm not at all. And now he's got grandbabies, and guess what? Boom, it just all of a sudden changed. Like, where was that for 18 years? So Dad, you know, I've watched him over the years, and I've tried to, I used to be impatient, and now that he's being patient, I've put a lot of that patience in my life just watching him over the years. And so I was thinking about how someone like him could make that switch from being impatient to now teaching juvenile special needs kids. You got to have patience. You got to have patience to be a teacher in the first place. But to be a special ed teacher, you need a little bit more than teaching those who are juvenile, having these rough homes. So Dad was telling me all these homes that these kids are coming from, and he told me one time it just tears them up. How a father and a mother could even do anything slightly bad to their kids, to give them a bad, on purpose, willingly give them a bad home life. There's a difference between someone trying to work hard and then someone not working at all. Big difference. And it's unbelievable difference. You see a father and mother who will do everything they can. Though they may not make a lot of money, it doesn't matter. they're still doing whatever they can. Then you have some that just look at their kids as maybe an extra $1,000 at the end of the year for taxes, or just to have a kid and to not even take care of it blows me away. I don't understand how someone can have that mindset, but they do. And so I think about all these homes just in our local area where kids don't have a good father or a good mother. And you just want to snatch them all up. You just want to kidnap them all and put them in a good home. But then obviously that's not how DHS works. So what do? If you're a good father, you know if you're a good father. You know that. It's not a prideful thing. You know if you're good to your kids. You know it. Because if you're not, it would tear you up every day, and then you'll eventually get used to being that way. If you're good, you know it. So here's what I encourage you to do, fathers and mothers. Set those examples to those kids, because the parents are probably long gone. They're probably, the Bible talks about getting your heart seared, conscience seared by hot iron. Those parents are more than likely gone. They more than likely are not going to change the way they're raising the kids. But you know what the kids could see? How parents should be. And if they have that type of example in their life, trust me on this, that when they see that example, though you're not their mom and dad, they know how they should be when they become parents. And if you have a big enough impact, when they grow up, they're not going to look back to, well, how did my mom and dad raise me? They're going to look to, how did these people and their example? I have someone that's near and dear to me who's my friend's mom. And I told her the other day at T-ball, her grandson's playing, and it's one of my good friends' kids. And I said, if something were to happen to you, I said, I hope nothing ever happens to you, but I said, if something does, I said, I want your permission that I can start a charity with your name. And she didn't really understand why. And then after, it's been since I was about 14 years old, if I couldn't buy ball shoes, she'd buy my ball shoes. And she didn't do this just for me, she'd done this for other kids. If we go on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we go to Springdale every Tuesday and Thursday for a practice, and she would drive 5 teenage boys who probably reeked after we played. We had practice in the morning, and then we had practice in the evening in Springdale, and she'd drive us. And if I didn't have money for food, guess who bought my food? She did. And I thanked her for all those things. I was very appreciative, and I said, I've never thanked you for any of this. And I told her, I said, you know, your example you have makes me want to pass it down to kids that can't buy stuff for themselves, or their parents can afford it. And so that's what I mean by being an example. You may pass it on to a child that may not have the best home life. And so when they grow up, they're going to say, how did that person do that? How did they teach me this? I need to teach this to my kids. And so that good example can win, and that's the type of fathers and mothers. So I'm just going to say this right now. When I say fathers, I'm including mothers as well. So fathers need to have that type of example to all their kids, and all the kids in the world that have parents, that don't have parents, to set this example. We're going to start first in Genesis real quick, Genesis chapter 5. And we're going to read a series of verses here, kind of back to back, all very self-explanatory about this topic. Genesis chapter 5, we're going to read about Enoch real quick. Genesis chapter 5, we're going to start here in verse 21. Genesis 5, and we'll start here in verse 21. It says, Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. And after he begot Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years, and his sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Okay, that's a great report. A great report to have. That Enoch did what? Walk with God for 365 years. That's a long time to be walking with God. Okay, what is man allotted in the Bible? What is it, like 63 years or something like that? Psalm says. A lot of people live to be around 80, 90 years old. A lot of people in the 80s. And your life should be, from the moment you become a Christian, you're walking into the grave with Christ. That should be your life. That should be the most valuable thing that you cherish is your walk with God. Because the more you cherish it and the more you are practicing it, the better your kids are going to be. Trust me. I know you're saying, Evan, your kids are 6, your kids are 3, your kids are 1. But I don't have to have kids to know the logic behind this. The Bible teaches this logic. The better you are, the better your family's going to be. And it's like 2 + 2 is 4. It's the way it is. So if you walk with God 65 years, that's how long he lived. He walked for 300 years with God. And he had sons and daughters. What an example to have. Now, Hebrews chapter 11, flip to Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 11. And look at verse 5. Hebrews 11 and verse 5. It says, by faith, Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death, and was not found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony that he did what? That he pleased God. What type of father do you want to be? You should be one that wants to please God. Because what are your children going to see? You desiring to please God. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 6. It says, but without faith it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seeks him. By faith Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with what? Moved with godly fear. And what was Noah? Noah was a father, and he moved with godly fear. Now you may say, oh, I know Noah did something pretty bad after the ark. Well, I can say you did something bad this week. Just because someone did something bad doesn't mean they can still set good examples. And here, this is an eternal example. This example of Enoch and Noah will never go away. So they done something so impactful to man and to earth, and in God's eyes, God's put their name in a book that will stand forever. So it's something that we can add to our code. All men have a way they live, they have a code, and these people should be involved in it. Divinely walked, or it says moved with godly fear, prepared an ark, and the saving of his household. So that means that his words that he was teaching and preaching, because Noah was a preacher of righteousness, he got his kids to believe. And he got them to believe in God and believe the cause that Noah was picked for. So he saved his children. He saved his household, even his wife, or whoever all was involved there. It says, by which he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. So we can be like Noah as well. Noah was, a preacher of righteousness. 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 5. We will not turn there, but if you want to write it down, 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 5 teaches us that he was a preacher of righteousness. And Genesis chapter 6 is where you'll find the story of Noah. Genesis chapter 6. Now, Joshua chapter 24. And verse 25. I do want to look at this. I've made several comments before. Me and Rick has talked a lot about Joshua and how we have a high respect for him. Joshua sets great examples throughout his life. Joshua 24 and verse 15. Joshua 24 and verse 15. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord. Now, I mentioned this before. When you go to someone's house, you see this on the doilies, right? I don't think anybody makes doilies anymore, do they? It's kind of a long forgotten art. But they used to be in every house. And you'd see this verse. Would you not see this verse about every Christian home there is? You see this verse. But Joshua, what he was doing was asking them a question. And making it where they had to make a choice. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you'll serve, whether the gods of your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. Now that's something you don't see. I mentioned this time and time again. You don't see this in people's houses. Joshua was not just saying, I'm going to serve the Lord. He's going to say, you have to make a choice. You know, my children are going to be raised with choices. I'm not going to force them to be a Christian. Right now, they're going to go to church, no doubt in my mind. When they get older, I can't force them into the water. I can't force them to repent. I can't force them to do anything, but I am going to give them a choice. And they're going to know from a young age what happens when someone dies. When we go to a funeral and that person was not a Christian, I'm going to tell them what happened to that person. I want them to fear God and fear what God has made. And it's crucial that they understand that they are going to have to make a choice. Most people think it's 18 years old, but 18 years old, they're still not an adult. I don't even think I'm an adult, and I'm 27 with 3 kids. It takes a while to mature. So they're going to make a choice one day, and I can't force their hand, but what I do hope for is not only me, but all of us have set an example in their life that they'll make a choice to be Christians. But I'm going to let them know that no matter what they decide, if they decide to go off their rockers and go be a part of the world, so be it. It's their choice. But I'm going to let them know, as Joshua told the Israelites, but for me and my house, so for me, myself, I'm going to serve the Lord. That's the type of example I'm going to set to them, and I hope that you will set to them as well. So for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And so not only at a personal level, look at this, as a family level. He's telling who? The world that where we're going to stand. Not ashamed of it. And so when your kids or say my kids are a part of a program that I don't like because it violates God's will and God's morals for us, I'm going to let whoever is over that know that my house is serving the Lord. So Joshua was not afraid to publicly let the world know. And now he's letting all the world know even today where he stood. He's an eternal example. This example will never go away. That's how big of an impact Joshua was. Now, lastly, Luke, the 1st chapter. The only reason we're going over is because Ron talked so long this morning. Luke chapter 1. There's a lot of people to mention, obviously. Obviously can't mention them all in one lesson. This is who I want to end on this morning. And I want you to think this morning not just about your Bible fathers. When we're having this invitation, and I want all people to obviously do this, I want you to think about how you're being looked up to, how you're being respected by, whether it's someone older or younger. You think about how Father's Day, some of us, your father may have passed, and so you don't get to spend this day. But you're going to spend the day reminiscing on stories. You're going to reminisce telling your kids, oh, your grandpa used to do this. And if he was a man of high respect, it's a wonderful feeling. Now, you are going to be that to someone else. And I want you to think about that this morning as a mom and as a father and just as an individual. If you're not a mom or a father, think about how you are going to be the example to someone. And after we read this text here, I'm going to invite Brother Dale up to lead us in this song. But I want you to think about your example that you're setting to somebody else and what stories and what examples you want to be passed down. And there are times you are not going to do what is right, but really what makes a man and what makes a woman is when you do something wrong, you do what? You fix it. Sometimes it's publicly, sometimes it's privately, but you fix mistakes. That's what shows who you really are. Not trying to cover them up, not trying to ignore them. Now, I want to look at Zechariah last here. Zacharias last. Luke chapter 1 and verse 5. There was in the days of Herod the king of Judah a certain priest named Zacharias of the division of Abijah. His wife was of the daughter of Aaron, and the name was Elizabeth. And they were both righteous before God, walked in all of the commandments and ordinances of the Lord blameless. Now, the reason I bring this particular one up is because it's not very common that you read of the husband and wife in Scripture both walking in the Lord. It's not a common phrase that you'll read. But both the father and the mother were walking in the Lord, law of the Lord, and the ordinances. And I like the very last thing, blameless. Now, that's a credential that's hard to come by, to be called blameless. Now, you're going to obviously commit wrongdoing, but I think what makes a man blameless and a woman blameless is when he fixes those issues. And that he is letting the world know that, yes, I mess up, but I will definitely fix whatever that problem is. So we are given a great opportunity this morning, all of us here, to make sure that when we are living, we're living to the best of our abilities. And you have something greater than anything the world can offer, and that is a spiritual family to be here for you this morning, to pray for you, to encourage you, motivate you, do whatever is needed to be done so that when you live here, you're living a life with God, you're walking with God, you're raising your children, your grandchildren in Christ. And so I want to encourage you to come forward if you have any physical or spiritual need. Brother Dale is going to lead us in a song, and I hope you will be encouraged. Thank you.